This meeting is being recorded.
Hello. We're so glad that you've joined us today. I see people are being allowed entry at this very moment. So we will wait a minute or so to allow everyone to enter the webinar. Again, we thank you for your time and your patience. We'll get started in 1 minute.
Hello?
As I see participants entering into the webinar, again, we will just wait an additional minute to allow everyone to get situated and have access to the webinar as they're entering.
Hello?
Hi, Angie,
Hello?
how are you? Yes, we will wait 1 second and we'll get started in a minute.
Okay, and no one is talking?
Not yet, Angie.
Okay, all righty. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for joining our webinar today. We're going to go ahead and get started. I hope that you are all able to see the screen. If you are not, please feel free to utilize the chat box and make a comment so that we can attempt to resolve the issue. Okay, well, we're officially getting started. As you were being allowed entry, I will let you know that this webinar is being recorded today. So again, I welcome you and thank you for joining our 2022 contracting process homeless division webinar. My name is Teresa Jimenez, and I'll be navigating the slides during today's webinar and introducing you to our speakers. We've scheduled an hour and a half for this webinar. If you have questions, please type those into the chat box. We will read your question and answer it at the end of this presentation. If by any chance we happen to run out of time, we will connect with you and your designated program manager or contract liaison, and they will provide additional assistance and answer any outstanding questions. However, as we move along, we will address the critical material that you need to know to help you complete contracting documents and be able to get through all of the questions you may have as we present the material. Okay, great. As we get started, let's review some important information. First, this webinar, as mentioned, is being recorded. It will also be made available to you as well as others for reference purposes. All participants are placed on mute to help reduce any accidental interference of noise. As already mentioned, questions are to be typed into the chat box, and we will read and answer your questions at the end of the presentation. Also, a very important tip, have your award notice on hand as you complete your documents or as we go through this webinar. The award notice has important information that you will need to reference as you enter and complete your documents, including who is your assigned program manager and your contract liaison. But more importantly, be aware and comply with the deadline dates listed on that award notice. Lastly, it's best that you complete the documents and submit those as soon as you can to your program manager or your contract liaison, and they will review the information you've entered into the forms, and they will provide you with any necessary feedback, or they will let you know if any modifications are needed. We can't stress enough that you review your award notice, stay ahead of your deadline dates, and submit your documents to your assigned individuals as quickly as you can so that they can provide you with feedback and communicate if any corrections are needed. Number 6, our last one here on this bullet point, is reminder of our city website. You can access their documents that are needed on the website that is listed on the screen. And again, we will be explaining those documents as we move along during the webinar. As part of our agenda, we'll do a high-level overview of our key important elements, and we'll share where any minor modifications were made to this year's 2022 documents. But without further ado, let me introduce you to our presenters. We have Alpha Riley from the Contracts Division. She will review the award notice and share what are required documents with your agency to submit. Teaming up from the Homeless Division are Christine Riley and Cindy Rivera. They will walk us through the program models, new selections to complete in the scope of services, such as the ADA and Section 504 compliance, and remind you of what documents need to be sent to the program managers. Our last presenter is Angela Smith from the Finance Division. She'll walk us through the budget forms. At the end, we'll answer the typed questions submitted into the chat box, but hopefully as the material is being presented, it'll answer any pending questions that you may have. So let's get started with what you need to know, and I'll turn it over to Alpha to start off with the award notice and contract requirements. Alpha, you can take it away.
Okay, so again, everyone, thanks for joining. By now, you all should have received your award packets with your individual awards. We do understand this year that there was somewhat of a change in the fact that you're getting award letters if you guys apply for multiple types of program names and models. They were sent separately. So as it relates to those contracts, these relate to new contracts that were sent out under those awards. So some of the things that we want to call your attention to, which would be unique identifiers for your own contracts, would be your purchase order number, your award amounts, the specification numbers, what we would call your vendor code or your vendor with an associated site, your program name and your program model, your budget term and end date. And then what you also have on each notice would be who your program manager is for this particular, again, program name and model. And depending on how many program names and models that you have and how many POs that you have, that individual could change per purchase order. So it's very important to pay attention to that award notice. You may have an award notice that has multiple awards, and your program manager, as well as your contract liaison and finance manager, may differ for those program names and models. So I just want to highlight that. Next. All right, so what you also will see in your award package is a contracting checklist. This is a very, it's just a summary of what we will need from you in regards to documents to get your contract awarded. So first and foremost, you'll have an agreement signature page. One of the things that we've changed this year for the agreement signature page is that they no longer need to be notarized. So those notaries should be removed. And if for some reason they're still on your signature pages, you do not have to have them notarized. All right, your current certificate of insurance. So we would ask you to follow those instructions that are there in regards to submitting them. That includes uploading them to iSupplier as well. The insurance requirements are listed in your actual terms and conditions. All right, so an economic disclosure statement. So a economic disclosure statement is needed for every purchase order. Okay, if you have a EDS, if you're set up electronically in the EDS system, the beautiful thing about it is that once you're set up in the system once, you're able to keep generating EDSs electronically without putting in the information all over again. If for some reason you need to change that information, then you'll have to do an information update. But for every PO, you actually will need to create a new EDS. And I'll go over that in a little bit more detail in a future slide when we talk about the economic disclosure statement. So the three documents that I just mentioned, which would be your signature page, certificate of insurance, and your EDS, you'll get a certificate of filing. Those documents need to go to your contract liaison. So there are different individuals that have been identified in the contracting process in which you send documents to. The next set of documents that we'll discuss go actually to your program manager. So those documents include a budget, scope of services. There are additional documents on here when we talk about lease agreement, affidavit. Our accounting representative supervisor, Angela Smith, will go over those in regards to when and if a lease agreement or affidavit is needed. But these are the items that you'll be working with your program manager to identify if needed. Next slide. All right, so this is a copy of the signature page. Now, as I mentioned, for the signature page, most of the signature agreement page do not have a notary. But for some, if you have a contract, because we have lots of different types of contracts, if you have one in which it still has the notary at the bottom, the notary is not required. You would just have your executive director or president of your organization to sign this document. Now, what I want to say, so let's just make sure everybody understands notary is not required. All right, however, I would ask that if that notary section is on there, do not fill it out, right? Because if you fill it out and it's wrong, then we're going to either reject it back to you and ask you to correct it or just remove it, okay? So please don't fill out the notary. Another thing I want to highlight here is signature authority. So right now, if it's the executive director or the president, then we will accept those signatures. If anyone other than the executive director or the president signs, we're going to ask for proof of signature authority. A lot of these, we have them on file. If you've submitted contracts probably within the last couple of months, but what you will notice from the contract staff as they reach out to you is that we're asking for proof of signature authority. Some of the types of documents that are proof of signature authority are documents from your board in which it's specified who has contract authority. Every agency is different. So what your proof of signature authority looks like may be completely different from another agency's. Some people have boards, some agencies do not have boards. Some have had to create documents. So if you have any questions about that, please reach out to your liaison and they will give you more information in regards to which documents are acceptable, or if you have some documents that you want them to review and which you're not sure, the contracts team would be more than happy to work with you to make sure that you have proof of signature authority for the individuals that are signing. Another thing I want to point out is that electronic signatures on these are not accepted. So it's okay if your executive director signs and then we'll accept a PDF copy. But when you electronically sign those, DocuSign those, a lot of times it has hidden embedded characters or embedded things in it that does not allow us to manipulate the document. So please make sure that you're not DocuSigning it and it includes that in the actual signature page, because we will actually reject it back to you. Next slide. All right, so your certificate of insurance. So the certificate of insurance, again, the City of Chicago, Department of Family and Support Services, we will be listed as the certificate holder. And as I mentioned before, the requirements are in the terms and conditions of your contract. There's probably a link that you can click on, and it should take you to your current terms and conditions. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to go back again over the economic disclosure statement. So you're dealing with city government, and there are certain disclosures that the city asks you to make by dealing with government. Again, for those of you that are newer through the system, there are videos and there are guides to help you through the process. So for the economic disclosure statement, you'll go through, you'll answer all the questions. And after you've answered all the questions, what the system will generate for you is a certificate of filing. And this is what you would return to your contract liaison. The great thing about the economic disclosure statement is that we now have a helpline established. That phone number is listed here as 312-744-HELP, and they're open Monday through Friday from 8:30 a.m. until 4:30 p.m. Again, one thing I just want to point out is that you cannot use the same EDS, we call it. So when you hear our terminology, you cannot use the same EDS for two different purchase orders. If you have a different purchase order number on your award notice, and let's just say you actually have multiple awards and there are different associated purchase order numbers, you have to provide a new economic disclosure statement. So again, in regards to your EDS, if you have questions about you need to change your captain, you can't remember what email address, you can't remember who the captain is, I would first direct you to actually look at the guides that are there. And if you still cannot figure that out, then I would say reach out to the help desk. Okay. All right. Is that it for next slide? Is that it for me, Teresa?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Alpha, for the wonderful job in providing an overview of the contract liaison needed documents. We really appreciate that. And as we move on to our next section, I'd like to introduce from our homeless division, Christine Riley and Cindy Rivera. They will let you know who's part of the program management team, as well as provide a high-level overview of the documents that are needed to be submitted to the program managers, along with changes to this year's scope of service. Christine, I'll turn it over to you for our next slide.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Christine Riley. As Teresa says, I'm the Director of Homeless Prevention Policy and Planning. I wanted to go over with you to talk about the different program managers. As Alta stated on your award letter, these names were listed. So this year we have from our team with Homeless Services, we have Carrie Moy, Susan O'Neill, Cindy Rivera, Natalia Santillan, and Denise Williams. Just as a informational for you, Susan is now back with us. So you may be getting emails from the program managers who were on your award letter saying that your documents will now be transferred over to Susan. So I just wanted to let you know that Susan O'Neill, for some of you, will now be your program manager, and the current name that's on your award letter will let you know that your documents will be transferred over to her. So thank you for that, paying attention to that. For our program managers, we really want to make sure that your contracts are executed in a timely manner. We know last year there was some delay, but this year we really want to make sure that our program managers work with you on a daily basis if needed, but work with you at least weekly to make sure your scopes of services and your budget forms, that initial review, is completed. So for the program managers for the Homeless Services Division, the following documents are needed. Again, your scope of services, your ESG certification, if this applies to you. So if you receive ESG, or there's an ESG funding, or there's an ESG match, your budget documents, your budget forms go to the programs division first, because it's a review tier process. It goes to the program managers in homeless services. Your indirect cost letters, and this again, if this is required. So if you state on your budget form that you're applying an indirect cost, we do need that indirect cost letter. And then a lease agreement. If you're leasing property using city funds, we need a copy of that lease agreement. Please know, because of the times we're living in, we would like all of these documents, all of the budget documents, to be in one packet. So you will have the budget forms first, then you'll have the ESG certification, and then the lease agreement following. And then the scope of services is separate. Next slide, please. I'm going to hand it to Cindy to talk about ESG.
Happy New Year to all, and welcome to our previous delegates as well as our new additions. So most of you are familiar with this form, but let me provide you with a little background. The ESG certification form is to be used by agencies who are being funded with the Emergency Solutions Grant, or ESG, and/or ESG match funds as designated by DFSS. So this is a mandated form required by DFSS in order to comply with HUD regulations. This form lists what costs are and are not allowable under ESG. So we are requiring agencies to submit an initial form with each of the budgets that are ESG affected. So even though the award letter does not indicate which funding sources are ESG match, no worries. When you do submit your budgets and an ESG certification form is required, your program manager will notify that one should be completed. So there's a couple of things I want to point out. Number one, it is the agency's responsibility to craft their budgets according to the allowable costs as outlined in the certification form. And two, when agencies view their budgets online, the certification form will be posted to confirm their acknowledgement. So there's a rule of thumb. When you're putting together your ESG budgets, just remember that all personnel and non-personnel costs should be directly related to clients, and be specific when completing job descriptions and justifications on how these are client-based. And if you need any additional information or have questions, please reach out to your assigned program manager. Next slide.
And now I'll just talk about the different program models under the Homeless Services Division. So we have the centralized shelter intake, transportation, and crisis response. This is the former program model, which was mobile outreach. And this is the program model that currently is managed under the Salvation Army. So if you see that, that's the mobile transportation to and from shelter. We have the coordinated entry system facilitator. Engagement services. Engagement services is new this year. We changed it from outreach and engagement services. So engagement services, under this model, we have drop-in centers, outreach, etc. We have the frequent user service engagement, FUSE, and this is for a program for families who are high utilizers of our shelter system, who will work with the agency and working through referrals to our shelters. We have the homeless prevention assistance program model, permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing program coordinator, rental assistance program manager. We have shelter, and shelter is new because with the continuum of care, the program model is now shelter, which encompasses both what we used to call interim shelter and emergency shelter. And of course, youth falls under that as well as emergency. We have a system planning program model, and then youth transitional housing. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk about the different sections in the scope of services. Though for those of you who have been with us for many years, as you can see, we have a brand new look. So thank you to Teresa and our team for totally revamping the look of our scope of services. Everything is pretty much the same, but I'm going to go through some highlights of this on the next slides. Next slide, please. So some modifications to the scope of services. The first page of the scope helps identify what documents you are required and who receives those. So again, as we stated previously in this webinar, to your program managers, you are to submit the scope of services, the ESG certification, if it's applicable to your program, your budgets for each award, your indirect cost letters, and lease agreements, again, if applicable to your program. To your contract liaisons, those who are in the contracts division under Arthur Riley, you'll submit your agreement signature page, current certificate of insurance, and your EDS, your economic disclosure statements. And again, this is new to what we've put on the scope of services this year on the first page. Next slide, please. If you have more than one site, we tried to clarify that we wanted you to specifically put what is going on at each of your sites. So as a friendly reminder, we've added the following notice to assist in keeping track of site information. So if you have more than one site, we want you to put the different sites name under 1, 2, and 3, but then the hours of operation is for that particular site. So we want to make sure that, and hopefully this new look helps us clarify what's happening at each site. Next slide, please. Your community area. Previously, we've asked for the ward. Now we're also asking for your community areas as well. So you'll put your program site, your program and site name, your address, your zip code, the ward it's in, as well as the community area. And we've been using the community area for different things throughout the city, but it helps us to know from you what community area you're from, because we'll be using this for our clearinghouse internally as well. Next slide, please. And besides English, please provide what other languages that your staff speaks and what languages you'll be able to serve your clients in. Again, this helps in regards to our understanding, getting an overall understanding of what your agency and the services that you can provide to clients. Make sure you specifically put what languages are pertaining to the sites in which you have applied for and that you're submitting the budgets and scopes for. Next slide, please. So accessibility for persons with disabilities. This has always been on the scopes of services, but we tried to make it clearer this year. So we want to make sure, in the past, there has been some different ADA certification forms and so forth. We did have a Section 504 training in November, and we will make sure that we send out those recording and notes again, because we know we have some new agencies with us. Again, as Cindy said, welcome. In regards to those sites for accessibility for persons with disabilities, the ADA compliant, and we want to see which sites are ADA compliant, meaning that you adhere to the American with Disabilities Act. Some of these may be physical in regards to your buildings, where you have ramps, elevators, that you do not discriminate against those with physical disabilities, that they cannot come into your building. Section 504 and reasonable accommodations. If some of you remember back in 2014, there was a team of us that went out and actually did measurements of different facilities. And there's two tiers in regards to Section 504. So to be completely Section 504 compliant in regards to your actual building. That means that you have Braille on all your signage. Your railings inside your bathrooms are certain heights. These Section 504 complete compliance in regards to the facility goes for those, especially brand new buildings in our cities, those buildings who've been built within the last 10, 15, 20 years, because they're adhering to the building accommodations for those with disabilities. Reasonable accommodations is not necessarily the physical building, but what your staff can do to make the stay at your shelter much better for those who may have some disabilities. I'm gonna give you a couple examples. So if there's somebody in your facility who says a disability that they cannot read, and that's something, is possible, they cannot read, a reasonable accommodation is your staff during that intake session actually reading to them your intake criteria, your rules for your shelter, the guidelines for the grievance policy. So it's making a reasonable accommodation. That accommodation that's not causing the agency a large funding stress or economic hardship in order to make the stay of this person who's coming into the shelter system welcome. Also, in regards to reasonable accommodations, if somebody has a hard time holding a cup in regards to drinking out of a cup or a can, a reasonable accommodation will be giving them a straw. So this way they wouldn't have to pick up the cup or can. You can put the straw in it and they can drink it that way. So those are types of reasonable accommodations. Again, we will send out the shelter policies for Section 504 reasonable accommodations. We will send this out again, and please look through this thoroughly because there's more information in there and more examples. Next slide, please. So with regards to the shelter program model, again, right here, we want to know if your agency will use funds to purchase meals for clients. So we want to make sure everything you need to check is checked. So if your agency will use funds, you can select no. If your agency is not using DFSS funding to purchase meals, you can just put no. Again, the number of meals you anticipate providing for each site. Again, this look is totally different than it was before. And we actually want you to put, as always, the number of beds that you have in your shelter system. So if you have a total of 100 beds, all single, you'll have 100, the total 100, single women 100. And then you will break it down. So there's some shelters that are only single women, some only single men. There's some that is single men or single women. And then there's families with children. And then we're asking by site, the number of beds by configuration. So again, we have congregate shelter, and then we have some of our shelter programs with individual rooms with shared bathrooms, or individual rooms with their private bathrooms. So please pay attention to this section on the scope of services. Next slide, please.
So let's go over the important reminders. Again, the scope of services, the ESG certification form, and the budget forms are all located and are accessible on the city's webpage, which the link is here, under the section titled Homeless Services Division. When completing your documents, remember to complete all the entry boxes, including signatures and dates. Email your assigned program manager all of the pages in your scope of services. Also, make sure you complete all the subsections specifically asking for the number of clients and households, as all information is needed. including, and please include in your program description, a statement about decompression. Another thing we wanted to say, when you submit your scope, we want the complete scope. So if your scope is 10 pages and the last 3 pages are informational, we still need the 10 pages and in order and with the page numbers visible. Remember to submit one budget form for each of your funding sources, along with any required accompanied documents, such as, again, the ESG certification form, indirect cost letter, and leases. One thing that will make it easier to review and reduce any confusion from the PMs, especially if we're asking you guys for revisions, is separating the scope in one PDF and PDFing each budget with its attachments when you submit. So for instance, if an agency has a program with 3 different funding sources, you should be submitting one PDF that includes the scope and then 3 PDFs for each budget, and along with each budget, whatever accompanying documentation you need. So if one budget needs a lease, then attach it to that one budget. So in total, you should be emailing 4 PDFs to your program manager. Remember not to include blank pages and ensure all the pages are in order. And one last important reminder, turnaround time to submit revisions should be relatively short. So the longer it takes an agency to resubmit revisions, budgets and scopes cannot be forwarded for continued processing. So please, please follow up when you see an email from your program manager. We would like to have your contracts executed as soon as possible so you could begin vouchering. Next.
Thank you, Christine and Cindy, for providing that great information. Let's continue moving along with the budget section and welcome Angela Smith from our finance division to help walk us through the budget and the attachments that are needed along with the budget. Angie, I turn it over to you.
Congratulations to all who have received a 2022 award. We can briefly look at the information on this slide because I'm going to go more into detail. And again, when submitting, as is stated, as part of the budget, your agency may need to submit an indirect cost letter. That is when you're using account 0801. You are to have, if you have an approved rate, you will send a copy of the approval letter from your cognizant agency. That will be attached with the budget. It's not a separate attachment. It has to be attached to behind form number 3. If you're asking to be reimbursed for rental of property, you must submit a copy of a current lease agreement. That will be a separate document. You're not to attach it to the budget forms. So leases will be separate. The indirect letter will be attached to the budget form. Also, too, if you are going to ask the City of Chicago to reimburse you for account 140 and you have subcontractors, you are to provide your program division with a separate copy of the sub-agreement with those agencies, because some of these programs may have sub-agreements because you are the sub-recipient to our department, DFSS. But if you subcontract out and you show it in the 140 account on Form 3, then you do. You won't, that will be separate. And you will send that on to your program liaison, and they keep that on file, because there are some grantors that request to see that copy of the sub-agreement, because if you're using their funding, they would like to see the copy of the sub-agreement. Next slide. Okay, just briefly, you can go on to the next slide because I will mention these items while I go over. So this is the form. Everyone, please remember that we changed the form, and how we can tell, if you look at line H, it has 2022. If we have 2021s come in, we will be sending them back to the program division to go back out to you if they may happen to overlook that, because we would like you to use the new forms. Do not send us any 2021 forms. This is a brief example of how everything should be laid out from lines A through K. Now, again, your delegate agency name, the program name, the person who prepares it, their email address, because if our office has to contact you, or if the program division has to contact you in regards to your budget forms, that should be a working email address. Also a telephone number. More than likely, we're not going to be calling, because if some folks are remote, then they're more than likely are going to contact you. Or if we are in the office, it's better contacting them via email. And we ask that if any of the accountants or program reach out to you, we would prefer if you could respond back within 24 hours. We would like the preparer's telephone number, your federal ID, your federal employer ID number. Also, I had skipped it, but you have to have your supplier number in. Most of you that have been with us, your supplier number will remain the same. The only time that it might change is if you are changing banks or whatever, that letter that's behind those numbers, that's going to change. But pretty much it will be the same, but I believe your supplier number does appear on your award letter. I'm going over to, letter I on the budget form. In the header, it is the calculations, because the forms will auto-calculate the total that of the award will go on line I. So you don't have to worry about writing it in, because also too, we like these budgets typed. So please do not send us a handwritten budget. Now I'm going to the right side of the header, where the global PO contract number, that appears on your award letter as when in the presentation. I know it was in the upper left-hand corner. You will type that in on your form, because that's your identifier for this award. For each award that you have, there is a global PO number tied to it. The global contract number, because most of the PO numbers are new for 2022. There are just a few that might have old numbers, but you will find your global number on your award letter, and please use that. Also for line L, that is your contract term. Most of these award, the contract term is tied to that global PO. And most of the global POs, if it's new, is going to run 2 years. So if you see it's January 1, 2022 to December 31st, 2024. You will leave line M empty. Do not put it in there. Don't try to think it out. It's not hard. Our finance team will put that number in when we go through the process and your budget is processing. Sometime we will put that number, insert that number in line M. So the agency, delegate agencies, please do not put that in at this initial budget review time. Later on in the year, when you do get an assigned release number, because it's auto-generated by a computer, that we get that information, then when you do a budget revision later in the year, then you will be adding that information on M. But right now, do not. That's why the example has it empty right now. Now on line N, you will put that because you're showing for this particular award how long this award will run for 2022. Only 2022. Now, those of you that are receiving IDHS, ETH funding, you will be submitting 2 budgets at this time, and the award letter should have it broken for the time period, but I'm not certain because I did not look at it, being honest with you. But for IDHS, ETH, you will have 1 budget that runs from January 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2022. The second set of budgets for the IDHS, ETH is going to run July 1st, 2022 to December 31st of 2022. That is your only instance for this major budget review. Now, down on O, you leave that blank because those numbers our office handles in finance. So don't get a creative and try to put it in what you think, because you're going to get a new set of funding strips. Majority of you will get new sets of funding strips. So leave line O empty or blank. Also P and Q. Our office will fill in your CFDA number if you have federal funds. If you do not have federal funds and they're local funding like corporate, there will not be a CFDA number nor a CFA number, CSFA number. The IDHS is for the funding we're using right now would have the CFA number, and that's Q. But the finance team here at FSS will fill that information in. This is the first half of, and this slide shows the first half of Form 1 because it's in a portrait form. So next slide. This is the lower part of Form 1. And you are to sign this, whoever is the authorized signer. You will sign in section S, blue ink, and you type in the name and the title. When you sign, please sign in blue ink. And please do not put an encryption on this form, because sometimes I have problems and when I'm viewing and I'm trying to do things with the form, the encryption prohibits me. So please do not put an encryption on your form, especially on Form 1. I will sign in section T. That's my area of signing. And for those agencies that have funding from some other funding or from other sections, it would be senior services, children's services, youth services. Those managers have their names sitting down and written in section T. These are the ones that are for your homeless, and you're to have them with the A. Smith on it, not one of the other managers, because then we will return and ask you to redo and send it with the correct, because we have entirely too many budgets that are coming through, and we don't have that type of time of trying to correct that. So each section for the department and funding and program types, we have our signatures. So again, there are some of the agencies that are listening now, they may have programs with workforce. Please do not use those forms because they have a different name on them. Next slide. Again, this is just briefly little highlights about the different areas. For form number 2, line F, you just completed because that is your, I believe that, because I'm not looking at another form, that is one of the numbers, I think your employer identification number. So if it doesn't link over, you have to complete it. Also, 2, in sections that are highlighted in yellow, and I didn't bring that up. Most of the sections that you are to fill out on the forms are highlighted in yellow. So on form 2, we'll come to it soon. On form 2, that's your personnel. You are to fill out if you're going to ask for reimbursement or give a snapshot of personnel. You're going to be filling out the columns 1 through 11. So again, the highlighted areas, if it's applicable to you, please fill them out, complete everything. Here is saying on one of the bullet points that if you do not need to use personnel form 2A, B, or C, and it's blank, please do not include that when you're submitting your budget package. Do not submit blank forms. Also, 2, when you print, especially on form 2, go to the next slide, please. On form 2, if you look at the reason why I flipped down to it is that when you're getting ready to print this particular form, you're going to have it choose, select, fit to one page, because sometimes it all depends how your computer is. It will take the last line and put it on a separate sheet. When you print it to fit on one page, selecting that, it will give you this all the lines that are for form 2. So just like when I stated for line F on form 2, that is your federal employer identification number. So if it doesn't carry over, please make sure that it's on this form, because the forms are supposed to highlight, because when you're preparing the form, you should prepare form 1 first and the header only. And then it will bring the information over to the other form in the header. But sometimes for line F, it may not pick up. So that's why So I was mentioning columns 1 through 11. If you're going to have personnel in this budget, you're going to show column 1 is your titles, how many people, column 2, how many people, 3 with their annual salary. Now, if you have a program that's not going to run an entire year, put out, if you may run like IDHS, ETA for 6 months, tell us how much that particular title is for 6 months. Because then when the controller gets it, they are not going on a year's salary, it's going on a 6 months because the budget is set for 6 months. If your budget is set for 3 months, so you're gonna give this, the title and how much as a cumulative for 3 months. For one, if there was one person in there, that 3 month salary, and then how many pay periods are within that 3 month period, because you know it better than I do. So you have to put that information in. Do not try to write it in because you want the form to calculate like it should all the way across. So you will put the title, how many people are in that title, the annual salary for it. If you have hours, put hours, how many pay periods, the percentage of time. Most of the time, in this example, I see that the executive director is at 10% because usually with some of the organizations, the executive director just spends a little bit of time with the program because they're spreading themselves around for that particular agency. Because you may have other type of activities going on that we fund you for. So in this case, it had 10% as an example. This position is saying that because then it'll start auto-calculating how much will be given or issued out. Now, how 7 is, that's column 7 is for the controller's office because it's a quick read to them about each position if you are asking for reimbursement. So when you fill in column 8, it will calculate how much according to the pay periods and your percentage of time. And then it will automatically give you your total cost. On this case, column 8 cannot and should not be greater than column 10 because column 10 is the total cost. And if you have titles in here, you are to have a brief description. Make sure if you're writing something in there that we can see it. So when you print it out and you're scanning it, take a look at it to see if it can fit and it can be read. Because also too, we have had it that the controller has actually sent budgets back to us, rejected them, and said that they would like to have a better description because if you have the same description and there are different titles, the different titles should have different responsibilities to them, majority of the time. So be aware of that. So also too, we have the example where there's an annual salary. Most of everyone on this example on Form 2, you would like to that they're going to be reimbursed back through the city. Now I'm going down below to the line 13. Your FICA, where is Social Security and Medicare. If you want us to reimburse you, it has to be proportionate with the total cost on line 12 in column 8. If you have less than, if column 8's total for salaries on line 12 is less than what the total is, and I'm mentioning the Social Security and the Medicare and any other fringe benefits. Again, column 8 cannot be greater than column 10, but column, as far as the fringe benefits, controller really watches it. It has to be in proportion with the total that's in column 8, line 12 for reimbursement side. So again, if you look at lines 13 and 14, over in column 9 and 10, it is already preset. So you can't go in there and change that. So that's already preset. So it's going to automatically generate a total for those. Again, if you want to get reimbursed, the highlighted area, you apply it. Now I'm going to go all the way down to 16. Also too, don't forget, if you do put any type of amounts in those columns and the fringe benefits, you must put some type of rate calculation. And our team in finance will run that calculation. And if it's off, we will be reaching out to you. So be mindful of that. And also too, if you try to put a formula in and it has decimal points, sometimes it's off. And when you finish, if you have any brackets in any of the columns, that means something is off. So again, if we get it and it's off, we are going to reach back out at you. So sometimes you might have to manually put your total into the one in the highlighted areas down lines 13 through 19. No, 13 through 18, I'm sorry. Yes. So, and also too, lines 17 and 18, if you are asking us for reimbursement or there's numbers in those columns 8 through 10, you need to identify what benefit it is. And the example I used on 17 was health insurance. So you need to tell, and then again, you will see the calculation. That's if you are going to give us some type of indication of expenses for those particular lines. So next. And this was an example where one title, I needed additional lines, so I used form number 2A. And this is for your driver. And for this example, there's no reimbursement, so you do not see any figure in column 8 on that line for that particular title. So again, and do not skip lines either. Please don't do that. So like if you were on form 2 and you had about 3 titles that you were going to put in the budget, don't use the first line, skip, and then go to the third line. Just put them right under one another. Also too, if you have it that you going to give any type of increase, and if you want to do it at this time, if you had, can you go back, Teresa, go back to the form 2. Can you go back? 1, yes. So if the executive director, or I'll use the administrative assistant. If the administrative assistant was going to make, like it states here, about 32,000 for the first 6 months, and they're going to get an increase. Okay, what you're going to do is for the first 6 months, you're going to average out how much they would make for 6 months. You're going to put the date under the title, and you're going to give me, and you're dividing that up, that 32 up for 6 months, the first 6 months. You'll have a figure there. You're going to put how many pay periods. So if it was like 12 pay periods for 6 months, and the percentage of time and how much in it's you're gonna fill in everything. Then you're gonna put that title again right up under that administrative assistant, one person. How much when they get the increase for the next 6 months, you are going to state how much they're going to give for the next 6 months if they're getting a raise. And again, you can put from July 1 through December 31st, how much they're going to get. Because when you add those two together, it's going to have how much it is for the entire year. So I just want to bring that to your attention. Because what some agencies do, because you have to remember, if it is the controller, once you execute, is looking at this document, you don't want them flipping and trying to figure out administrative assistant 6 months. They might just think that you're just going to hire somebody for 6 months. But then you might go to Form B, 2B, and put it over there because you have that many folks in that you're listing. How are they going to know that it was associated with this first title that you put for administrative assistant? So that's why I state that you should have it right up under the title from the first 6 months to the second 6 months for the same title. Okay? Next slide. Next slide. Okay, non-personnel. Just a few highlights that we do not use account 400 here at FSS. So please do not put anything in there, even if we're not paying for it. Do not use that account at all. Also, too, another highlight was about the indirect for the account 0801. If you budget it and you have costs in the grant share, you definitely must have either a approved, and it has to be current, approved federal. If it's the federal, I need the indirect letter, the approved letter, and all the pages that have the signature and the rate and the date. Now, if you're asking for indirect and you don't have an approved rate, then you will send us a certification letter on your agency stationery stating that you like to use the 10% de minimis, and you're going to tell us if you applied or if you did not apply. So that will be in it, and it will also be attached to the budget behind form number 3. Also, too, for agencies, go next slide, please. For agencies that cannot fit their description, you don't have to give us a book. In column 6, if, like, for instance, those who have the FIT program and similar, and you have several things listed and they cannot fit in the box, in the description box in column 6, please put an attachment, say attachment, put the PO number, your agency name, and put the account number. But in the box, you can put a few items in there and then type in the word see attachment. And so we would see that attachment sitting behind form number 3. The attachments and the indirect letters, they go behind form number 3. So here is an example of how, again, in the yellow sections is where you can fill in. If you are going to give us a forecast for non-personnel items, what you are going to expand and use for your program. Grant share in column 3 is to indicate that you would like us to reimburse you. Again, column 3 cannot be greater than column 5. Also, too, going down to account 140, your professional and tech services. Again, if you have subcontractors, again, please submit a separate your subcontracting agreement to your program liaison, and they hold it on file. Because again, there are some grantors that do want to see that. So, and it's been happening for years, and they will ask about it, because when we have some that come in and do program reviews, they will go in and ask for it. Also, too, for travel, please be aware this travel is for folks at the agency, meaning your staff, not your, and our grantors have got on us about this. The travel will be for staff. And this one example is showing that is for staff travel, mileage, parking, Lyft, Uber, when going to maybe court or client appointments, or if it's for meetings. That's what you have to say. Just don't put travel in there, mileage and whatnot. You need to tell us it's for staff travel. If you want to give gift cards or so to clients, if that's what your agency does, there are requirements that you have to abide by if you're issuing out those venture cards and all, because you got to keep track of it. But that will go down in the 999 account, and you can name it client assistance, but we'll get down to that. But I just want to bring that to your attention. Materials and supplies. That's briefly what you can do. You see food in there because this particular example is like a shelter that prepares food for meals for the client. If you're giving something away to a client other than the Greater Food Depository, then anything given and handed out to, like food or a gift card or so, but that's something between you and your program division, because they know better about how your program is running. So if they do ask you to remove it, they know your program much better than the finance team will. That if you had a gift card, that would be down in client assistance. Gasoline goes into the 300 account, and that's gasoline for your agency's vehicles, not for your staffing, going filling up at Shell and BP. No, this is for your agency vehicle, gasoline for agency vehicle. You keep a roster and all. So also too, you see in the 300 account, the computers and printers. Those of you receiving CSBG funding, you cannot put computers, printers, electronic type things into your budget if you are CSBG funded. Again, account 400, just leave it blank. And again, leave it blank if you do have equipment that's an internal thing at your agency, but do not put it in the budget. For the indirect, this is showing the indirect cost at 11.347. Then I would see in this case, I wouldn't ask for the indirect letter because we're not reimbursing. So, and then when, but if you are going to ask us to reimburse, we're going to run the calculation to see if the total cost and the grant share is at the rate that you stated, and we're going to verify it against, if we're going to reimburse, we're going to look for your letter. If it is not right, we will reach back out to you via email to let you know that we need the adjustment made. And if the adjustment is made and it's a great difference, then that means you have to redo your budget because then it changes your totals in your budget. Account 999 is used for items that don't fit in the accounts that are above, like 100 through 801. So in this example, it's for clients assistance, and it's for venture cards for clients, gloves, scarves, hats for clients, gift cards, and you're going to specify what type. Again, remember the budget, and please don't send me budget because it's just like, oh, they're getting their budget together. We, right at this point, we have entirely too many, and the process budgets are going to go into the program liaison, a program manager first, because they have their review that they have to do. If they are fine with your budget, because again, these are their programs, so they better would know what they like to see in the budget. Or if you have questions about, should I put this in there? You can go out to your program liaison. Now, if they're uncertain about something acceptable, they may contact the finance division. But please do not send the finance team your budgets via email. Only if we ask you to make a correction. And if possible, if you can get it back to us within 24 hours from when we reached out to you. Again, are pretty much for those of you who have been with us for a while, our accountants are Linda Ruan, Frankie Coral, and we have a young lady who sometimes you all get an email from, Charlotte Guilty. They are on the finance team. And sometimes those will be folks who will reach out to you. Thank you again. And also congratulations. That's the end of my presentation. Also too, I'm sorry, the instructions are out on the website with the budget forms. Next. Next.
Great. Thank you, Angie, for walking us through and explaining the budget forms. I'm sure our agencies found the information helpful and the examples helpful as well. For our very last section, I know that we're running close to ending or being at 3 o'clock. If you have a couple of minutes, please stay on. And again, if you have a question, please submit it through the chat box. And this is our very last section for our webinar. So let's go through some of those questions now that have been submitted. I will read the question and either Alpha, Angie, Christine, or Cindy, I will field those to you. So please feel free to answer. First question that I have here is in regards to the budget worksheet. The question is the F supplier number site number the same as the vendor number or the grant agreement?
Alpha, do you want to, you're saying is the
I'll repeat the question again.
vendor,
The question is,
the vendor
yes.
number, supplier number are the very same thing?
Next question, also regarding the budget. Where do you locate the M standard PO release number?
That number will be given, we get that once we start to upload your budget. So that's why you would not fill in M. If you want to go back to form number 1, can you do that, Teresa?
Yes.
Flip back to form number 1. Right there. Okay. That one, hold on. M, the release number, that will be generated once our team in finance is okay and I sign off and control, to give you an idea, if we're okay with it and I sign off on it and it's uploaded, start the processing and putting it in the system. If it's accepted by the controller's office, a release number will generate at a later date, and we put that information, and then later you will see that out on the website. But again, for those of you who have been with us a long time, since the inception of eProg, because again, there are so many budgets and whatnot are moving, those moving parts to execute. Some people are very proactive. You can check iSupplier. So you have your global number, and people will go in and check to see if they see their lines. So I would say from time to time, just go in there and see. Now that release number because see, I don't see that side. Some people can see their release when they go in. Once that the controller approves the budget, because after that, there's some other steps that go in the contracting process in order for it to execute to get out to the website. Because some people do wait to say, oh, I don't see it on the website. But I have a lot of folks who are very proactive, and they go in there and they call me or send me an email, and I see. I'm gonna go in and start vouchering. I'm saying, go ahead. If you see the lines are up and you try to tap to submit a voucher, go ahead, go on and do it. Because you are technically supposed to have a copy of what you sent us on file. So if it's your grant section who is preparing the budget, a little note to you, send it on over to your accounting section to say, this is the pre-budget, and once it gets approved, this is how it's going to set up. But see, some people don't do that. And sometimes when it's executed, some people think that we're going to, those days have been passed. That's a nice way to put it. You getting a notification that, okay, go out there and look and see your budget is on the website. So you can just be proactive and go out. Because see, when you go to the city website, you're going to put in your global number. But I would say during the process after it leaves us, you can check into iSupplier, because the same PO is going to be loaded in eventually into iSupplier. We call it eProg. You voucher, that is the iSupplier side. So hopefully I answered that question.
Hi, Teresa. I know we're low on time. It's right at a little after 1. I can stay on a few minutes. I wanted to just answer some of the just really quick an overall question that has come in the last few about the care scopes. We are working to update the care scopes for everyone, so you will have a separate a separate scope of services for cares. So you will have a separate scope of services, and we will make sure we get those, post them on the website once they're finalized. Hopefully, Teresa, is it by the end of the week? What's the timeline of that?
Yes, hopefully so. I did respond to that question as well. I did notice that was a question coming through. They should be up by tomorrow, Monday at the latest. If not, also the program manager will receive a copy so they can email their agencies directly in case they don't notice that on the website. But that information will be shared as soon as those are posted. And if not, also the program manager can send out the scope itself once it's ready.
Thank you. And also, just really quick, the program model for PSH is the permanent supportive housing program model that you should check off, that you should be under. And we will put together an FAQ, because I don't think we'll be able to get through all of the questions on, that has been come through the chat, but thank you so much for all of your questions. I know I saw a couple questions previously about, is it mandatory for agencies to have a TTY line or phone? It's not mandatory, but it's up to the agency. Again, look in the, once you get the Section 504 policies, and you should have them to see, there is a section on special accommodations in regards to hearing impaired, but it's not a mandate by our department. But there are other resources out that would assist with that. I'm just running through real quick, Teresa. The total amount, and out there, if you're still on here, the total amount on the contracts on the award letter, I think that's the question. That's the amount for this year, 1 year. It's not for a total of 2 years. On your award letter, it's from January 1st, so your budget year, January 1st to December 31st. Andrew, you asked about community areas. You can just Google Chicago community areas. They change all the time. The names change. So you can find out your community areas that way online. And I'm sorry, I know I'm not going to get to all the questions. I'm just trying to see what's a common theme for these questions. I think I answered the scope. Someone asks, is it always necessary to include job responsibilities in the budget? Yes, because if you put the name, the title of the job that you're hiring for, we need to know what exactly they do for this, so that it corresponds with like the scope, in your RFP, what services that this particular title will provide. So you should have done it before. You said you have not done this before, but yeah, you should always put the job responsibilities. That has always been a section on the budget form.
Oh, I see someone said that they sent a budget in December and our global contract term is wrong on the budget form 1. Well, that agency, you need to reach out to your program liaison. And,
yeah,
and I would say, but
reach out to your program. Yeah. Reach out to your program manager, and they can make a change. So it's not going back and forth, because it can be whited out and changed. It can be edited, if you want to say that. But reach out to your program manager, but we are reviewing that in our review process.
Okay.
I think that's an overall. I'm looking. Angie, if you can answer this question really quick. It says, for client assistance regarding gift cards, what is a backup? What backup is required for submission when vouchering for gift cards?
Oh, you're going to have your receipt for the gift cards, the purchase of the gift cards, and it has to be in your budget. So the check that you might have written, or how you ever paid for it, the purchase, the invoice, and that proof that it was actually those gift cards were paid for. Because we're not going on how many you issued out. We're going on how you purchase. So you purchase maybe, like I say, you might have purchased 20. So you purchased 20. So we just need to see that proof that you purchased those 20 gift cards, that invoice, and that it shows that it was paid for. That's fine. And remember, it has to be in the budget, because if it's not, they'll just delete.
And there was a question in regards to, in previous years, a program, it's an interim housing program. They want to know how to label it, combined under contract for single adults. That was emergency shelter. The program model is shelter. So that's the program model you will check off. It would be shelter. And again, we're going to write all these questions, record all these questions, and we'll send out an FAQ. Teresa, did you want to do a wrap up?
Yes. This brings us to our end of our contracting webinar. I want to thank everyone, especially our presenters, for walking us through the documents that are required to be completed for our contracting process. But before we end our session, on behalf of the DFSS Homeless Contract and Finance Division, we thank all of our delegate agencies for your services, your partnership, and your commitment to work with our city to prevent and help end homelessness. Please stay healthy and safe. And with this, we conclude our webinar. And as mentioned, we will follow up with questions and answers, as well as a copy of this recorded webinar. And I believe during the speaking points, Christine also mentioned she had some ADA information, Section 504, and reasonable accommodations that will also be distributed. So thank you for your time, and this concludes our webinar. Thank you.